Hello again to all who have tuned in. Podcasting from Ontario, California, welcome to Fractured Poet, a podcast for all of you poetically insane individuals who love getting lost in the art of poetry. I am your host, Katrina Wisniewski, just another person in the world obsessed with words, striving to make sense of it all. The poems of choice for today's episode have a lot to do with life, or at least a version of a life. There are many things that are left unanswered during our time on Earth, and at times we are forced to reflect on those unanswered whatevers. So these two poems, I guess, reveal two separate moments in my life where I was either confused at a crossroads or just simply venting out what I was thinking at that time. This first poem is called A Life Not Mine. Confined to a small space and time, being forced to live a life that is not mine, lost in a moment that keeps repeating. Is there a lesson to be learned? Disappearing without a trace, unable to regain composure, I fear what might come next. The world as I know it is spinning out of control. Will I ever make it back alive? Trying to make sense of this life, a life I wasn't meant to live. When writing this poem, I can't recall the exact emotion I was working off of, but reading this poem again, it almost defines what the world is going through right now. Being confined to a small space, forced to live a life that you are not necessarily used to, and each day is being repeated. And the world as we know it right now is, in fact, spinning out of control, as we are all left to try and make sense of it all. I don't know, it's just crazy with the stuff going on with COVID and everything else. This poem definitely has some relevance to life in the present day. Aside from that, though, as I have probably mentioned in previous episodes, my life personally has not been a bed of roses. I have had to deal with a lot of inner demons of my own, trying to work through a lot of bullshit, and I've said many times before, poetry is a therapeutic tool for me. I write out what I'm feeling, how I'm feeling, what those emotions make me feel like, and so on and so forth. And that's what this poem reflects. My life simply does not make sense sometimes. I am often left to question many things about not only my life, but myself. It may not seem like it, but it's somewhat difficult to write about real life problems, especially when I'm sharing it with who knows how many people on a podcast. To write a poem that reflects my personal issues or emotion is a struggle, believe it or not. I have to work through a lot of stuff to get to the end result. And I'm constantly deleting things, erasing, crossing out, rewording, or saying screw it all together and not write a poem at all. And when I come across these moments, I appreciate poetry that much more. But yeah, moving on from that, the second poem is called Out of Focus. There was a time when her vision of life made sense. Everything was as it should be, yet she often contemplated life's direction as it slowly became out of focus. Life can sometimes be a perfect enigma, she thought one day, assuming you have it all figured out, only realizing you were nowhere near. It is all just one big blurry puzzle. She used to assume that life was on autofocus, peeking through a life's lens, hoping things would change. But maybe life is not that simple. Her reflection of life is mirrored by confusion, living a life through a pair of prescription glasses that have lost their strength, overlooking an image that is completely distorted. She is invisible. Oh my heavens, this poem was a pain in my ass. Let me tell you, when I first wrote out this episode, that poem sounded totally different. In other words, the poem I just read was not the original poem I chose. When I typed up Out of Focus into the episode script, I did not like how the poem sounded at all. To me, it did not make sense. It didn't sound right, didn't look right, so I decided to rewrite it completely. It took me about, give or take, 2 hours to do the rewrite. See, and this is what I am referring to when I talk about the frustrations about being a poet. I can come across a poem I wrote years ago, read it, hate the way it sounds, and tear it up left and right and create something new out of what I already have written down. Sometimes I don't even use the original words. In this poem, I did some of the stanzas and words, but took out a lot and rearranged the hell out of it. But anyway, after rewriting this poem, I noticed how life is the perfect enigma. Life is a puzzle that can sometimes never be solved or put together. And just when you think you have it all figured out on paper, life shows you different and brings you back down to its level. Just goes to show you that life always has its curveballs, and we pretend to be prepared for anything, but in reality, we're really not. And that, ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately concludes the show. To those of you who are always tuning in, and even those who are just joining in, I hope you liked what you heard and you tune in next time. You can catch this and future episodes at anchor.fm/Fractured Poet. This episode of Fractured Poet was written and produced by me, Katrina Wisniewski. Music from both Alternative Rock Volume 1 and Rock Electronica Volume 4 from a website called freeplaymusic.com. You can also follow me on Instagram at Fractured Poet. And as always, thanks for listening. And tune in next time.